In Isaiah 66, speaking of the Sabbath, it is the one verse that we have that we'll be keeping Sabbath in the hereafter, and we seventh-day Sabbath keepers, like our Hebrew friends next door, ought to really enjoy this verse. It says in 22, "For as the new heaven and the new earth, which I make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants and your name remain. And from new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord." Will you mind if, 1,000 years in heaven and back to this earth, and we've seen the awful destruction of the wicked, and then our earth, which has been consumed with the purifying fires, and the very elements have melted with fervent heat, it needs to be recreated, and now there we see it, it's beautiful, and Eden has been restored, and Adam and Eve go into the garden, and lo, they find the very vines they trained with their own hands. It says very nice things about God, that he'd think of a little detail like that. That's the God who said of Jairus' daughter, "This little girl is hungry." That's the way he is. Likes to do things like that. Then, if at the end of the first week in the new earth, God should say, "How would you like to join me in what I did at the end of creation week in the beginning? And let's observe the next 24 hours, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown." Do you think we'd say, "Don't tell me we're back under the law again? I thought Christ was the end of the law. I thought Sabbath keeping was legalism." Or you might say, "Why are you still testing our obedience?" If we say the Sabbath is an arbitrary test of obedience, then we make no sense out of this verse, that in the hereafter God will still be testing our obedience and arbitrarily saying, "Let's keep Sabbath." No, I think that the first Sabbath in the new earth, when God says, "Anybody want to join me in celebrating all that's happened now, the recreation of our world?" Think of all there'll be to remember the first Sabbath in the new earth. Would it be a miserable experience? What a day that would be. And then if at the end of the first Sabbath in the new earth, God would say, "I have never enjoyed a day better in my whole life. I'd like to do it with you every week." Will you say, "Oh no, maybe one, but not every week"? Would you? Then we've missed the whole point of the Sabbath. I refuse to allow the Sabbath to be an arbitrary test of obedience. It's nothing of the sort. It's just the opposite. The Sabbath reminds us of the original creation, how perfect it was, and it reminds us of the Exodus when God loved his people enough to set them free. It reminds us of the events of Crucifixion Week, and it's a type of the final rest to come. And when we finally enter that rest, and God says, "Why don't we celebrate every week?" who's going to grumble and complain? It's too bad we've said the Sabbath is so arbitrary, because then our Christian friends that look forward to living in the new earth, then it makes no sense to them to keep Sabbath there. So we have not served the Sabbath well. Many times. We could say better.